The courtroom was cold, not the kind of cold that makes you shiver, but the kind that makes you feel small and alone. The walls were tall and gray, and the wooden benches creaked every time someone moved. In the front of the room sat a judge behind a huge desk that looked like a throne. His navy blue robe was perfectly pressed, and on his wrist was a gold watch that sparkled under the bright lights. In the middle of all that coldness stood a girl. She wore a dark red uniform that prison guards had given her. Her name was Maria, and she was only 19 years old. Her hands were cuffed in front of her, and her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from crying all night and worrying about people you love. Around her, people whispered. Some pointed. Some shook their heads like they already knew she was guilty. A woman in expensive jewelry leaned over to her husband and said, "These poor people, always causing trouble." The husband nodded, without even looking at Maria. Maria kept her eyes straight ahead. Her back was straight, even though her heart was pounding. She had learned something important from her mother. No matter how scared you are, never let them see you break. The judge shuffled some papers on his desk. His name was Judge Harrison, and everyone in town knew. He came from money. His grandfather had been a judge. His father had been a judge. And now he was a judge, sitting in the same chair they had sat in, making decisions about people's lives like he was picking what to eat for lunch. Case number 4782. The clerk called out in a bored voice. The People versus Maria Santos. Charge, theft. Judge Harrison looked up. His eyes swept over Maria like she was nothing, like she was dust. He saw the orange uniform. He saw her brown skin. He saw her cheap shoes. And in his mind, he had already decided who she was. "So," he said, leaning back in his chair, "another thief. How predictable." Maria's lawyer, a young man fresh out of law school who was doing this case for free, stood up. "Your Honor, my client." "Silence," the judge said, holding up one hand. His gold watch caught the light again. "I'll hear from the defendant first." He turned to Maria with a smile that wasn't really a smile. It was the kind of smile a cat gives a mouse. "Tell me, Miss Santos," he said slowly, "do you understand why you're here?" "Yes, sir," Maria said quietly. Her voice didn't shake. The judge's smile grew wider. Then he did something strange. He started speaking in French. Fast, fancy French with big words. "Vous pensez que vous pouvez venir dans ma salle d'audience et jouer à l'innocent? Les gens comme vous any respectent jamais la loi." The words flew across the courtroom. Most people looked confused. The clerk frowned. The lawyer's mouth fell open. But a few people, the rich ones in the back, they understood, and they started to smile. One old man in a suit chuckled. A woman covered her mouth, trying not to laugh. They knew what the judge was doing. He was making fun of Maria. He was calling her a liar and saying people like her never respect the law. And he was doing it in a language he thought she wouldn't understand, so she would feel stupid and small. Maria felt her cheeks get hot. She felt her hands start to shake inside the metal cuffs. But then something happened inside her mind. She remembered something. She remembered her mother, Rosa, coming home at 6 in the morning after cleaning office buildings all night. Rosa's hands would be red and cracked from chemicals, but she would smile and make breakfast for Maria and her little brother, Carlos. "Education is power, Mija," Rosa would say. "Learn everything you can. The world tries to make us small, but knowledge makes us strong." Maria remembered Carlos, only 7 years old, sitting at their tiny kitchen table doing homework while his stomach growled because there wasn't enough food. She remembered promising him, "I'll take care of you. I'll make sure you have what you need." That promise was why she was here. That promise was why she had made a terrible mistake. She had tried to steal medicine from a pharmacy because Carlos was sick and they had no money. The medicine cost $200. They had $12.35. But that wasn't what mattered right now. What mattered was that this judge, this rich man who had never gone to bed hungry, who had never held his sick brother while he coughed, who had never watched his mother cry over bills she couldn't pay, this judge thought he could break her with fancy words. Maria lifted her chin. She looked the judge right in the eyes. The courtroom got very quiet. Even the people in the back stopped smiling. Something was about to happen. They could feel it. Maria took a deep breath. Then she spoke. Votre honneur, she said in perfect French, clear and strong. Je comprends chaque mot que vous avez dit. Et comprends aussi que vous essayez de me rabaisser parce que vous pensez que je suis stupide et sans valeur. The courtroom exploded into whispers. Judge Harrison's face went pale. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The lawyer nearly dropped his papers. Maria wasn't done. She kept going, her voice getting stronger. Mon professeur au lycée parle français. Elle grandit à Haiti. Elle m'a appris vertuitement après. Les cours parce tu croyais en moi. Elle m'a dit que la langue est un pont arme. Mais vous utilize poor blesser. The judge understood every word. She had told him, Your Honor, I understand every word you said. And I also understand that you're trying to put me down because you think I'm stupid and worthless. My high school teacher spoke French. She grew up in Haiti. She taught me for free after school because she believed in me. She told me language is a bridge, not a weapon, but you use it to hurt. The silence that followed was so thick you could touch it. Judge Harrison's face turned red, then white, then red again. His gold watch suddenly felt heavy on his wrist. His expensive robe suddenly felt like a costume. For the first time in his whole life, Judge Harrison felt ashamed. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear people breathing. Everyone stared at Maria like they were seeing her for the first time. The girl in the orange uniform wasn't just a poor criminal anymore. She was a person, a real person with a brain and a heart and a story. Judge Harrison sat frozen in his big chair. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for his glass of water. He took a sip, but it didn't wash away the bitter taste in his mouth. That taste was shame, and he'd never felt it before in his courtroom. Miss Santos, he said quietly. His voice was different now, smaller. I apologize. That was deeply inappropriate of me. Maria didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just nodded once, accepting his words but not forgetting what he'd done. The judge cleared his throat. He looked down at the papers in front of him, but this time he actually read them, really read them. The words on the page started to become a story instead of just a case number. It says here, he began slowly, that you attempted to steal medication, antibiotics for a child's ear infection. For my brother, Maria said, her voice cracked just a little. Carlos, he's 7. He was crying all night because his ear hurt so bad. The free clinic said he needed medicine, but it cost $200. We had $12. A woman in the jury box wiped her eyes. The clerk looked down at his desk. Even the police officer standing by the door shifted uncomfortably. The report also says, the judge continued, that you were caught at the pharmacy door. You hadn't left the building yet. And when security stopped you, you immediately put the medicine back and started crying. I knew it was wrong, Maria whispered. I knew it the whole time. But I heard Carlos cry, and I couldn't think straight. My mom was at work. She works from 10 at night until 6 in the morning cleaning buildings downtown. I'm supposed to take care of Carlos when she's gone, and I was failing. He needed me, and I had no money, no way to help him. Judge Harrison took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. When was the last time he'd really listened to someone? When was the last time he'd seen a person instead of just a case? Tell me about your mother, he said gently. Maria blinked, surprised. My mom. Yes, tell me about her. Maria's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. My mom is the strongest person I know. She came here from Mexico when she was 16, all by herself. She learned English by watching TV and listening to people talk. She worked in restaurants, in hotels, anywhere that would hire her. When she had me, she was only 17 and my father left, but she didn't give up. The words poured out of Maria now, like water breaking through a dam. She worked 2 jobs when I was little, sometimes 3. She would come home so tired she could barely stand, but she'd still help me with my homework. She'd still read to me. When Carlos was born 5 years ago, his dad left too, and Mom just kept going. She never complains. She never says it's too hard. She just works and works and works. And you, the judge asked, what about you, Maria? I graduated high school last year, top of my class. Pride flickered in her eyes for just a second. I got a scholarship to community college. I want to be a nurse. I want to help people who can't afford doctors, people like us. I go to class in the morning. Then I work at a grocery store from 3 to 9 at night. I give all my money to Mom to help with rent and food. She paused, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. The night I tried to take the medicine, I just worked a double shift. I was so tired. Carlos had been sick for 3 days, getting worse. Mom's boss won't let her take time off. She'd lose her job. We'd already spent our food money on the clinic visit. I looked at Carlos's little face, all red and hot with fever, and something inside me just broke. A tear ran down Maria's cheek. Then another. I'm not a thief, she said, her voice shaking but clear. I made one terrible choice because I was desperate and scared. But I'm not a bad person. I've never stolen anything before. I've never even gotten attention at school. Judge Harrison felt something crack open inside his chest. It was a feeling he hadn't had in years, maybe decades. It was empathy, real, painful empathy. He thought about his own children. They were grown now, successful, living in big houses in nice neighborhoods. When they were young and got sick, his wife would call the family doctor, who would come to their house. The doctor would prescribe medicine, and they'd have it within an hour. Money was never a question. Suffering was never an option. He thought about his grandson, who was about Carlos's age. If that little boy had an ear infection, would Judge Harrison break the law to help him? If his grandson were crying in pain, and there was no other way, the answer came quickly. Yes, without hesitation. Yes. Miss Santos, the judge said, and his voice was gentle now, almost kind. I've been a judge for 23 years. I've seen thousands of cases. I've sent hundreds of people to jail. And somewhere along the way, I forgot something important. He stood up from his chair. The whole courtroom seemed to hold its breath. I forgot that behind every case number is a human being, a person with a story, with people who love them, with reasons for what they did. I started seeing criminals instead of people. I started thinking my job was to punish instead of to find justice. He looked at Maria with eyes that were no longer cold. You made a mistake. A crime, yes, legally speaking, but you made it out of love, out of desperation. And you were caught before you even left the store, which means under the law, this could be considered attempted theft, not completed theft. The medication was never actually taken from the premises. Maria's lawyer jumped up. Your Honor, if I may... You may not, the judge said, but he was almost smiling. I'm not finished. He turned back to Maria. I'm also looking at your record. Spotless. Perfect attendance at school. Volunteer work at a food bank. Letters of recommendation from teachers. From your employer. From your neighbors. Everyone says the same thing. Maria Santos is responsible, hard-working, and kind. He picked up his gavel, and everyone tensed. I'm reducing the charge to a misdemeanor, reckless endangerment of property. And given the circumstances, given your record, given the fact that you're clearly a productive member of society who made one desperate choice, I'm sentencing you to 6 months probation and 50 hours of community service. The gavel came down with a bang. No jail time. Maria's lawyer gasped. No jail time. Judge Harrison confirmed. But Miss Santos, you'll report to a probation officer once a month. You'll complete your community service, and you'll stay out of trouble. Can you do that? Maria couldn't speak. Tears were streaming down her face. She nodded frantically. And one more thing, the judge added. He reached into his robe and pulled out his wallet. He took out several bills, more than $200, and handed them to the bailiff. Make sure this gets to the Santos family. For medication, for food, for whatever they need. Your Honor, the bailiff whispered, shocked. You can't. I just did, Judge Harrison said firmly. And it's not charity. It's restitution. For the way I treated this young woman. For the arrogance I showed. for forgetting my humanity. He looked at Maria one last time. Your teacher was right. Language is a bridge, and I use it as a weapon. Thank you for reminding me what justice really means. Case dismissed. The gavel banged again and the courtroom erupted. The bailiff unlocked Maria's handcuffs. The metal fell away from her wrists, and for the first time in 3 days, she could move her hands freely. She rubbed her wrists where the cuffs had left red marks, but she barely felt the pain. Her whole body was shaking, not from fear anymore, but from relief so powerful it felt like lightning. Thank you, she whispered to Judge Harrison. Thank you so much. The judge nodded, but he couldn't quite meet her eyes. He felt the weight of every harsh word he'd ever spoken, every person he'd dismissed, every story he'd never bothered to hear. It pressed down on his shoulders like stones. Maria's lawyer grabbed her in a hug, laughing and crying at the same time. I can't believe it. I've never seen anything like that in my entire career. People in the courtroom were standing now, some clapping, some wiping tears, some still in shock. The woman with the expensive jewelry, who had whispered mean things earlier, sat very still, her face red. She suddenly felt ashamed of her own words. But Maria wasn't paying attention to any of them. She was looking at the courtroom door, where a small figure had been waiting the whole time. Maria! Carlos burst through the door, his little legs running as fast as they could. Behind him, their mother Rosa rushed in, still wearing her cleaning uniform from work. She left her job early when she got the call about the trial, risking everything to be here. Maria dropped to her knees, and Carlos crashed into her arms. He wrapped his little arms around her neck and squeezed so tight she could barely breathe. I thought they were going to take you away forever. Carlos sobbed into her shoulder. I thought I'd never see you again. I'm here, baby. I'm here. Maria held him close, breathing in the smell of his hair. Cheap shampoo and little boys sweating home. I'm not going anywhere. Rosa reached them and pulled them both into her arms. All three of them hugged in the middle of the courtroom, crying and laughing at the same time. Rosa's hands, rough and cracked from years of cleaning chemicals, cradled Maria's face. My brave girl, Rosa whispered in Spanish. My strong, smart, brave girl. I'm sorry, Mama, Maria cried. I'm so sorry for what I did. Sure, Mija. It's over now. We're together. That's all that matters. From his bench, Judge Harrison watched this reunion. He saw the love there, pure and fierce and unbreakable. It was the kind of love that didn't come from money or status or big houses. It was the kind of love that survived poverty and hardship and fear, the kind that made people sacrifice everything for each other. The bailiff approached the family quietly and handed Rosa the money the judge had given. Her eyes went wide. No, I can't, she started. It's not a gift, the bailiff said gently. The judge insists. For Carlos's medicine and anything else you need. Rosa looked up at Judge Harrison. Their eyes met across the courtroom. She nodded once, a gesture of gratitude and dignity. And he nodded back. No more words were needed. As the Santos family left the courtroom, hand in hand, something had already begun to change. The people who had watched this whole scene would go home and tell their families. They'd tell their friends. They'd share the story on social media. The rich judge who tried to humiliate a poor girl and got a lesson in humanity instead. Within days, the video of Maria speaking French went viral. Millions watched. Thousands shared. The story spread like wildfire. Comments poured in. This girl is a hero. Share this everywhere. That judge learned a lesson he'll never forget. Like if you believe in second chances. Subscribe to our channel for more stories of justice and hope. People started sending donations to the Santos family. A local hospital offered Rosa a better job with benefits. A university reached out to Maria with a full scholarship. Carlos got the medicine he needed, plus toys and books from strangers who'd heard their story. But the biggest change happened inside Judge Harrison himself. The next day, when he returned to court, he did something he'd never done before. He arrived early. He read every case file completely, not just the charges, but the stories behind them. He looked at the people who came before him and really saw them. A young man caught with marijuana because he was self-medicating for anxiety he couldn't afford to treat properly. Judge Harrison connected him with free mental health services instead of jail. A woman who'd shoplifted diapers for her baby, he reduced her charges and connected her with organizations that provided family support. An elderly man who'd stolen food from a grocery store, the judge discovered he was a veteran living on a tiny pension. He got him enrolled in programs he didn't know existed. One by one, case by case, Judge Harrison started using his power differently. Not to punish, but to understand. Not to humiliate, but to help. Not to break people down, but to lift them up. His fellow judges noticed. Some thought he'd gone soft, but others saw the wisdom in it. They saw that showing mercy didn't mean ignoring justice. It meant finding the right kind of justice for each person's situation. The clerks noticed too. The bailiffs, the lawyers. They started treating defendants with more respect, speaking to them like human beings instead of criminals. The whole atmosphere of the courthouse began to shift, like winter slowly turning into spring. 6 months later, Maria completed her probation and community service. She'd spent those 50 hours volunteering at the same food bank where she used to get help for her family. Now she was on the other side, handing out groceries to people who reminded her of herself. Judge Harrison came to her final probation hearing himself, which was unusual. Normally, a different judge handled these. "Miss Santos," he said, and there was warmth in his voice now. "I've read the report from your probation officer. Excellent behavior. Community service completed with distinction. You started college and you're earning straight A's." Maria smiled. "Yes, sir. I'm studying nursing, like I said I would. I have no doubt you'll be an excellent nurse. You have something that can't be taught, compassion born from experience. You'll understand your patients in ways many medical professionals never will." He paused, then added quietly, "I want you to know that you changed me. That day in court, you reminded me why I became a judge in the first place. Not to wield power, but to seek truth. Not to punish, but to guide toward justice. You gave me a gift, and I'm grateful." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "You gave me a second chance, your honor. You saw me as a person, not just a mistake. That's a gift, too." They shook hands across the bench. Judge and former defendant, now equals in humanity. As Maria left the courthouse that day, her probation officially ended. She walked out into bright sunshine. Carlos was waiting with Rosa, holding a balloon that said, "Congratulations." A small group of people who'd followed her story online had gathered to celebrate with her. Maria looked back at the courthouse one last time. Those gray walls didn't seem so scary anymore. Inside those walls, something important had happened. A moment of truth had crashed through years of prejudice. A brave voice had spoken up and changed not just one life, but hundreds. Everyone that Judge would meet from that day forward. She thought about what her mother had always told her. Education is power. But she'd learned something else too. Respect is power. Dignity is power. And sometimes the quietest voices speak the loudest truths. "Respect matters," she whispered to herself. Those 2 words became her motto. She said them when college got hard. She said them when people judged her for being poor. She said them when she faced any challenge. And years later, when she became a nurse working in free clinics, helping families just like hers used to be, she'd say them to her patients. Respect matters. You matter. And they did. The story of Maria Santos and Judge Harrison spread far beyond that one courtroom, that one city, that one moment. It became a reminder that justice isn't about who has the most money or the biggest words or the fanciest watch. Justice is about seeing the truth in people's hearts. It's about mercy meeting humanity. It's about giving second chances to those who deserve them. Judge Harrison never wore his gold watch to court again. He donated it and used the money to start a fund for families who couldn't afford medication. He called it Carlos's Fund, and it helped hundreds of children get the medicine they needed. The courtroom where it all happened became famous. Law students visited it. Lawyers told the story to inspire others. And on the wall, someone eventually hung a simple plaque with just 2 words. Respect matters. Those words greeted everyone who entered, reminding them that in this room, Everyone deserves dignity. Everyone deserves to be heard. Everyone deserves a chance to tell their story. Because in the end, that's what justice really means. Not the cold, heavy kind that crushes people, but the warm, human kind that lifts them up. The kind that says, I see you, I hear you, you matter. And when one person has the courage to speak that truth, like Maria did on that frightening day when she could have stayed silent, it creates ripples that spread outward forever, touching lives in ways we can never fully measure. Truth spoken with calm dignity can outlast pride. Mercy, once invited, can reshape destinies. And sometimes, all it takes is one brave voice to change the world. Did this story touch your heart? Like this story and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe for more inspiring stories about courage, justice, and hope. Comment below. What would you have done in Maria's situation? Let's talk about it.